Hi everyone, welcome to Single Value. So today we're looking at a Humacyte, and they just recently had their launch event for Symvess, so there's a lot of talking points in that, which is quite material. First we'll just look at share price. Share price is $3.09, which is continuing to dip lower, which is kind of weird because the company's making really good progress. And as much as I like to say it's very undervalued, and every time it just continues to drop, which is just irrational. I can't convince you more than if you to just do some research and understand the business and see that these guys spent so much time getting where they are and to have FDA approval for their type of product, which there is no other type of product even close to what it is. That's how unique of a proposition this company has, and in the future it is definitely going to be worth more, but obviously the share price just keeps dropping and it's hard to convince some people that it is really good value. It's really undervalued, and we can just the only thing you can really do is just focus on the company itself and the milestones it continues to hit. So if you want to listen to a presentation, go to the events page, and then it should have a listen to webcast, and then once you jump in, you just fill in the form and you can watch the presentation. So I'm just going to jump to a few talking points that are really going to matter. So firstly, I think the exciting one was the engagement with the Department of Defense. So they are talking with the Department of Defense, and they only started really engaging with them once they got the final label approval, which we thought they might have been talking before that, but actually they haven't. So they've really just been engaging after the approval came through. So I think there's going to be a little bit of time before we see a Department of Defense order. I think the chance of an order is very highly likely, which I think will be a game changer for the company because their orders are usually fairly large in size. So next talking point would be the addressable market. So this is the slide that kind of tells you how they got to their target market. So they believe there's about 26,000 kind of quite serious kind of surgeries that go along for trauma, and out of those, over 7,000 is synthetic, and over 18,000 is using the saphenous vein. So there is talking points about it being very hard to beat the saphenous vein, particularly if we measure on a cost point as well. But if we go just looking at synthetic is a market that they can basically replace. So that 7,000 kind of target is actually very realistic. They do go on and say that they don't expect that they will take over the market, but they believe that they can get about half the market, which will be, so out of the 26,000, they believe 13,000 is quite a realistic number. So if you do the numbers, 13,000 times the cost of Symvess, 29,500, you get about $380 million. So if they can get to that point eventually, then it's quite lucrative for them. Well, at the same time, they'll be going for other kind of like products, which say like dialysis, which has had a slight delay because they are going to do some trials with say like women before, and get those results before they actually submit to the FDA. So they believe probably next year is going to be the time when they do submit, and apparently that will take about 6 months because it's a supplementary BLA, and so it just attaches on to the current approval. So so there is a lot of people did expect this year, but unfortunately it's going to be next year for that. So I think the biggest focus this year will be Symvess, and just their progress with Symvess. So in terms of Symvess, so this presentation was fairly good in updating everyone on how things are going. So they did the budget model, and Symvess did come out really well in terms of a cost point, but even then, if they can get NTAP, which is a reimbursement that can reimburse up to 65% of the costs over 2 to 3 years to the hospitals. So you imagine a 29,500 price tag, and you can basically potentially cut that price in half because the hospitals get the reimbursement. then it's even much easier to sell to hospitals after that. It's much easier to convince. So they expect probably that might come along in August, and then they can start getting that going in October. So if they can get that, I think that itself is a massive game changer, because all of a sudden the cost measurements are quite different for the hospitals, and they're more likely now that if it's going to be cheaper as well. So it makes for much more easier selling. So I think NTAP will be quite a game changer if they can get it, and I don't see why they won't. So the other talking point was that they've gotten to 26 hospitals to start the VAC process to analyze the value for the hospitals. So back at the end of February, 26th of February, they announced they had 21 hospitals, and then now they've updated just less than 2 weeks that they've gotten to 26. So they are making really good progress. And I think that number is just going to continue to add up. So I think this is going to be the where things really start to just continue to build, and we can actually analyze the progress of the amount of hospitals that they've managed to get interested. So the VAC process can take up to 3 to 6 months. So possibly we'll probably have to give it at least 3 months before we start seeing hospitals more or less jumping on and starting to order in good volume. So there's 2 hospitals that have already completed the VAC approval process. So those orders should start eventually, once they need it, I guess. So everything looks really good. They did continue to have 2 speakers of some of the largest trauma centers in the country. That's those also are quite gruesome as well, so I won't flip to those slides. But if you are interested, then definitely give this presentation a check. There is definitely a lot of interesting information that's worth looking at. I think that's more or less where I've wanted to look at. So here's their kind of their selling points. So of how they are approaching the market. So there's about 200 level 1 trauma centers, which they will target first. They have 10 salespeople going out. So if you imagine there's 200 main centers that they're sending these people to, then they don't actually need a really large sales force. There is also the other point of that 26,000 number, that those are just really serious surgeries, and there's also surgeries that are on the borderline of being serious that also may consider Symvess as well. So even though they estimate it to be 26,000 as the addressable market, technically it could actually be larger if hospitals actually look at it and go, we might consider that as well. Because sometimes there are injuries where it doesn't make sense on the time sensitive basis to say to get the saphenous vein, then they might use that as well. Or where people have the financials and they're willing to just go for it anyway, and it's not actually as serious where you definitely need it, they may opt for it anyway. That's where the NTAP kind of will make a difference as well. If the NTAP lowers the price point by say half, then that's even more of a compelling point to use it on even less serious surgeries. So you can kind of get the idea that that 26,000 isn't the whole market. It's just for them, in a way, it is a really conservative number to some extent, because it's only considering the serious stuff. But there is stuff around it that may actually even may use it as well. But at the price point, a lot probably, unless it's serious, then they may not use it. but if they can lower the price point with NTAP, then that addressable market actually might increase, if you get what I mean. So they also talked about addressing level 2 kind of trauma centers afterwards, if they feel like that it would make sense. So yeah, they have the right team, as they say, 10 sales staff. They've got their budget impact model, which they find very convincing. Yeah, and they've got the superior clinical results. So everything looks pretty good. So this is the budget impact model. So you can kind of see that basically ATEV comes at like probably the lower end of kind of like the cost kind of basis. So it's kind of like, it makes a lot of sense for hospitals to kind of use it, and that's also how they've priced it. They've priced it to the point where it does make a lot of sense for the hospitals, particularly if there's any future complications. So yeah, definitely a presentation worth checking out if you are interested in the details. If not, I basically summed up the main points. So yeah, like hopefully as they continue to progress, the share price kind of sees a bit of an uplift. It is ridiculous how it's at $3, and before that, like the share price was actually higher before the FDA approval, but after the approval, people just go like, oh, actually sales might take a bit of time, we're not interested anymore for some reason. But once these guys continue to scale their sales, I think we will see an uplift in the share price. And now that we know that they're in discussions with the DOD, and that it hadn't started, like not in a serious way until they got the final label approval, because I guess there was no point in discussing selling a product that they don't know when it was available. So they haven't, yeah, and started talking with, say, like the different departments of the Department of Defense in terms of ordering this kind of product. And I think once that order comes through, that will be quite a serious kind of like uplift for the share price. Also, as they continue to get more hospitals on the VAC consideration process, the market will keep getting interested. So if you also have to consider that those 26 hospitals are probably part of that 200 that they've identified as being the level 1 trauma centers that do the most surgeries. So if you think about it, if those 200 do the most surgeries and your target was, getting within, and they're doing quite a lot of those surgeries out of that 26,000, you can see that actually they don't actually have to convince that many to actually generate a very large volume of sales. Even though the amount of hospitals doesn't sound very large, the amount of surgeries that they're doing is quite significant. So even though they've gotten only like say 26 hospitals to get this process going, that itself could be hundreds of the product being used. So definitely don't underestimate the amount of hospitals that have signed on. It's actually quite a significant amount. And in some cases, they're kind of groups. So when that group approves it, it actually approves it for multiple hospitals. So then we can actually see that kind of jump as well. So definitely would just like keep an eye on numbers. And obviously the first quarter isn't expected to be high in sales, but we get to see the progress that they continue to make. And potentially we get the bonus that the DOD order does come through eventually. And then, that will be a surprise bonus that we don't know when it's going to come along. But if it does, it's a game changer as well. We know the NTAP's in August, so possibly, I think, probably two quarters after now, we will see really, really good progress by the company. The CEO did discuss before this kind of event that she does expect a lot more sales near the end of the year. So yeah, like there is that. Like obviously as an investor, like time is money. You don't like waiting, and waiting to the end of the year is not a great one. But I think if you see the value in a company, then you definitely hold or buy. For me, it's the value is very clear, but obviously it's going to take time, and like investors don't like waiting. That's just how things are, and yeah, and obviously we're not in a great market. Like if you look at a lot of stocks you hold, they are also down as well. So even though Humacyte is down, it's not fully because of the company. It is also just the kind of market we're in at the moment. But once we see the market uplift, we see a lot of companies uplift, and things continue to look good. So it's very easy to start to look at the share price and feel like things aren't performing on the share price front, so that you can look at the company and think it's not performing, but it is performing, and eventually it will be recognized in the share price. You just have to be really patient. If you've got any questions, comments, post below. Until then, good luck investing, everyone.